So we just got done with the 2.4 dev stream, and at the end they had a 9-minute and like 30-second discussion where they took one of the writers and just asked him very, very, very important questions, and we got real answers to them. And while it was only 9 minutes, we dissected it on stream for over 3 hours. In fact, I'm on stream as we make this video. So today we're just going to be going over the ZTalk and everything that they spilled, because it was a lot. A croissant! Holy shit, I needed that. The first question that was asked was, who is the mastermind behind Season 2's main story? Are there more conspiracies lurking behind Isolde and Sarah? The answer to this was completely unexpected, as they said that the Exaltists are kind of over. They said that Sarah is almost the sole member running towards the creator. However, there are still going to be some little remnants of them doing whatever. But they did mention that Sarah, after receiving the power from the creator, has received her first instruction to bring that power to the creator. There's a couple different options that we came up with that this power could be, and one of them was like the creator's power was actually originally detached when it was originally granted to an overseer, and so as it's been bouncing from overseer to overseer, the creator wants that power back, and that's what it's instructing Sarah to bring, is basically that portion of its power back to it so that it can be restored to full power. However, I don't really like this option. I like the second option we came up with a little bit more. Now, the more interesting idea is that the power that the creator wants Sarah to bring back to them is the power of the Qingming sword. Now, as you know, Sarah originally tried to gain the power of Talos and technically did succeed in gaining the energy of Talos back in 1.4. And while I know that they said that Sarah just received her first instruction to bring that power to the creator, Sarah did mention during that moment when she was taking the energy from Talos that they had been looking for this monstrous energy for so long. So it could have just been that Isolde had tasked her previously with getting the energy from Talos, as it seems like they are specifically targeting the sword users that have been crafted from different cursed objects. So one thing that they mentioned is that the Qingming sword was not originally a sword, which we'll get more into later, but the Qingming cursed object was originally found near the Limnian Hollow and was then crafted into a sword using that cursed object, which, funny enough, Talos was also just etheric matter before also being crafted into a cursed blade. So it could be that there are just a bunch of cursed objects pertaining to each companion hollow from Hollow Zero, that being Cretan, Limnian, Papago, Persinus, Solov, and Hoara, with Hollow Zero counting as a 7th. So this could link into the old theory that the community knows, that there could be 7 cursed swords, like the 7 deadly sins, as shown from the Prophecy Commission that I know a lot of you have not played. If you don't know what the Prophecy Commission is, it's a really long story. I might have to make an own video about it, but for those who know, you know what it is. It basically was you went around and explored like a hollow, and you got to like deal with the different sins, and you got to either befriend them or defeat them, and there was like different endings. But that's besides the point. Anyway, there's a theory that there's 7 cursed swords. So it could be that there are 7 cursed objects that are pertaining to each of the Great Hollows or Companion Hollows of Hollow Zero, as the Qingming sword was found near the Limnian, that pertains to the Limnian Hollow. Now, we don't know where Talos could have come from. It could have been Hollow Zero itself, but there's no direct tie of where the etheric matter was taken from. However, as I'm speaking right now, I did just realize that the Talos sword did actually resonate with a core that was inside of the Milanoe Hollow, which is a companion hollow of the Persinus Hollow. So maybe there's a chance that Talos was originally from the Persinus Hollow, but that's besides the point. There could be 7 cursed objects that basically are being turned into these weapons. So as we continue on the story, we might see more cursed weapons that are not just swords, but were formed into different objects. The creator may need the energy from these 7 cursed objects to gain its original power back. But obviously that's just one theory of what the power could be. We could be overthinking it. It could just be something simple like the eye implants power from the siblings, which, you know, could be it. But I think due to the fact that the Exaltists have been deliberately baiting the sword users out, they baited Miyabi into being able to use the sword. That way they could steal the energy there. Sarah is now baiting Yi Shiyin, saying that he can solve the Qingming curse problem with Shinguang, causing him to then join the Exaltists, which then baits Shinguang in to try to save her brother, to then use the sword and then take the energy from that. I know it sounds convoluted, but it's really not. But yeah, let me know what you think this power could be. The second question was, is this really the end of the Exaltists? What exactly is the creator? Are they human or ethereal? And while they didn't directly answer if the creator is human or ethereal, this is where they mentioned that the Exaltists effectively collapsed after Isolda's passing. However, they did mention a quote that was, "Creator will once again have the chance to set their sights on New Eridu," which is a very interesting thing to say due to the fact that it says once again. Now, we talked about this for a while on stream because I don't think there was really a major instance in terms of the history of New Eridu where something massive with the creator happened. Otherwise, it definitely would have been mentioned by other characters in the story already. And if we talk about Eridu's time, it doesn't fit with them saying once again set their sights on New Eridu. But either way, it is very interesting that they mentioned once again the creator can set their sights on New Eridu. Now, the next one was actually a very interesting one. It was, is Topps friend or foe? Which is a conversation that I've had with commenters all the time, because technically there could be some people that work in Topps that aren't necessarily inherently evil, but everything that we've interacted with Topps in the story mostly leans towards being evil. And they actually said that we'll be getting a new PV that will give us a closer look into Topps as a whole, which is going to be really interesting because there was a mention by Zhao in 2.2 that there's a round table during Topps, and we do know of a couple people that could be within that round table. That being the lady from Miyabi's trailer, the one who tried to stop Miyabi from defeating Lerna but failed miserably, and also Edmund. There's a chance that Edmund could also be in the round table. If you don't remember who Edmund is, he was the one that Hartman was trying to get close to during the 1.6 and 1.7 epilogue, and we do actually know what Edmund looks like as we see him in the background of the auction. And we do also see him on the TV or hear him on the TV as he's denouncing the Ravenlock family whenever Hugo reveals that he destroyed Hartman's dreams, as he should. They then expand on Krampus a little bit, comparing them to a blade that was created to cut the corruption within Topps. As I'm sure many of you know by this point, Krampus is a faction that is technically working underneath Topps, but is their review process. They basically look at everything that Topps is doing from all the different companies and stop corrupt things from happening. And they do this by apparently every member has their own review and judge process. Basically, every single member of Krampus is a judge to their own doing. They do also mention that each person's abilities are the main reason for their inclusion in Krampus, which they didn't really expand upon, but it's going to be interesting to see where the Krampus members end up going in the future. They did ask, what kind of group is Spook Shack? And I thought this one was really funny because all they did was basically just reiterate that Spook Shack is just like a forum group. And they said, yo, read Internet and you can see their interactions. So they basically just said, hey, proxies, read the Internet system. Okay. Now we got to the big question. They said, among the 4 great AIs, what's the current status of the other AIs besides Fairy? And when will they make their appearance? There was a lot that we could gather from this. The first thing is they said no one knows what form they took before being deployed in New Eridu, which inherently makes it seem like they did exist in a different form before New Eridu. So whatever that form is, I hope they go into. The only thing I can think of is that they were important figures who then had their consciousness copied and then had like an AI made out of them, which isn't completely out of the realm of possibility, as we know that they did have the technology to copy consciousnesses, as they did that with Magus, right? They copied Magus's consciousness and put it into an intelligent construct, which is a gun. Now, she's not an AI, but she's an intelligent construct. So they could have taken their consciousness of these important figures and basically created like an AI network around how they think. We then finally got actual confirmation, which was pretty clear before the way that they had it worded during the intro to Fairy when we signed the contract. But they confirmed that Fairy was in fact the first AI out of the 4 to reach an agreement, but that there are other AI that are active right now. Which means at some point between Fairy giving us the agreement and us accepting, whether it be forcefully by Fairy or not, that there is another AI that is active. Now, when they say this on screen, they do have the lore teaser playing in the background. However, they've taken off the other 3 AI and have very explicitly on screen yokai for quite a long time as they're describing this, which means yokai is the highest possibility right now, I would say, of being the next AI that we see in the story. So if yokai is active, then who could have yokai? The first and most probable option that I think could be it is White Noise. They were the ones who originally tried to hack the HDD system at the start of the game. However, the one that did hack us at the start of the game was an incompetent underling of White Noise, not the real White Noise. And we do have these people that were dog shitting on Nullface at the start of 1.3, and while we don't have any idea who they are because we've never seen them again or have them expanded on, it could be that they may have gotten yokai, just because it would be interesting to have like an enemy group have one of the AIs if they really are enemies. But besides that, it could also be the HIA AI. Now, for those that have been keeping up with the HIA AI plotline, during the second tower, there was a letter that you received when you got, I believe, like halfway, that said if you make it to floor 100, then there would be a secret level, basically. And when you got to floor 100, it then put you in a simulated version of Lumina Square, where you got to talk with someone who was basically saying that they wanted to follow in the footsteps of Joyous and become like a trailblazer. And so he made this secret level to find those proxies that are on the level of what Joyous could have been. And he mentions the biggest thing to take out of that was that he mentions being a trailblazer and wanting to like trailblaze. No, it's not connected to HSR. It's just the term that they used. What's interesting though is that during the next tower that they released, there was a secret level that you could get to after reaching floor 100 or floor 50. I don't remember exactly which one, but it allowed you to access floor -1. Now, when you entered this floor, there was an actual voice that was talking to the proxy during this entire fight.
You're so fortunate to be here listening to my welcome message. Fight with your phantom body to your heart's content. Only then will you be worthy of my gift.
And they do mention Joyous, and when you complete the level, the AI sends you a message to the HDD, which if you then go to the HDD and read the message, yeah, I'll have it on screen. It is a long message, but they do mention the fact that they were an AI that was like placed into the system, and they got to like basically reform themselves by reading the internet. But they mention how the person who made the secret level in the last tower was someone that they find inspiration from, and they end the letter by also saying trailblaze or a trailblazer. I'll have the message on screen. And a lot of people did think that this was one of the 4 AIs, which I did denounce at first. However, now that we know that there is another active AI, which odds are it seems to be yokai, it could be this AI just because this AI is the one that's playing games within the HIA system and kind of like hacking and doing like funny jokes or whatever. However, we don't really know how the data corruption works with yokai, because that is the main purpose of the yokai AI, is to corrupt data. But with that said, we can move on to our next candidate, which is Rain. The only reason why I'm saying Rain is because everyone seems to want the fact that Rain has an AI. There is the only thread that I can myself say makes sense for Rain to have an AI is that she is the one that gave Nicole the commission for the strongbox. Now, I don't think she knew what was in the strongbox. I don't think whoever gave her the mission to give to Nicole told her what was in the strongbox or anything about the AI, but she was the one who did give it to them. However, the main theory of Rain having an AI is that she may have Ghost because she's a great hacker. However, I think that this would undermine her story if she was just using Ghost the entire time or recently obtained Ghost. I do think that Rain is just a goated hacker that she learned her skills from while she was in the organization when she was with Evelyn. Now, another candidate is the mayor, because he's suspicious as shit. We still have no idea what he looks like. He has an odd amount of information about the siblings, and there's just, you know, there is a chance that the mayor could potentially have one of the AIs. I don't think so, because I don't know where he would have obtained yokai after the activation of Fairy, but you never know. These are just potential candidates that it could be. Now, the final candidate that I think could potentially have yokai is one of the other students from Helios. That's not Seed. I do not think Seed's power of corrupting machines comes from yokai. I think that's more of a Helios test subject ability, which we will actually get into that here in a little bit. But I do think that that is separate. But I do think that it could be one of the other students that is in the photo that's in the office. There are 2 students that have their face scratched out. Now, we don't know if they perished during the expansion of HoloZero and the fall of the old capital, or if they just got lost. So I think it would be really interesting if one of the other students of Helios that was actually underneath Carol gets one of the other AIs, and then we kind of have like a little interaction as ex-Helios students who found powerful AI. Now, as for when yokai could have been activated or have been used for, there was a moment when Fairy got shut down during 1.4. This was when public security was about to storm the office. Now, they do mention during this moment that there is no reason why Fairy should be shut down, or that the HUD should be effective because they have Fairy now. And after Fairy got rebooted from this instance, she did start acting really weird. So I'm not exactly sure what happened here, because they never ever explained what shut Fairy down, and it doesn't make any sense for it to be an EMP because everything electronic was still working within the office. As you see, the HUD system is still on, and whichever sibling you chose is the one that's trying to download data or hide the thing, essentially, when public security is about to break into the room. Now, what's interesting though is that Fairy does mention during the Roaming the Ether event that she doesn't like to interact with ether corrupted data, and yokai does corrupt data. Now, we don't know how yokai corrupts data, whether it's through using ether in some way or not, but it could be the reason why Fairy was acting weird was because that moment when she got shut down, she realized that one of the other AI had become active, and she just didn't either, from the contract, can't say that the other AI is a thing and is active, or is still hiding it for her own little like plot line, whatever she is waiting for the opportunity. The next question was, what intel can you share about Carol Arna and Helios Academy? Now, this is where they mentioned that Seed is the legacy of Helios Academy, which I don't think they've ever mentioned in game. I think what they mean by that is that she is just also from Helios, but they do mention that she is an incomplete test subject from one of their last projects, and that they are also a part of Helios's secret plan that the siblings were also a part of. Now, I don't know if she was an incomplete test subject due to the expansion of HoloZero and the fall of the old capital basically stopping that project in its tracks, or if they basically stopped the project a little bit before the fall of the old capital, and that's when Seed escaped. But either way, she is an incomplete test subject, which makes sense due to the fact that she kind of loses control of her power when she gets emotional, because they didn't really have time to train her with the power or whatever they were trying to do with her during their time at Helios. Okay, this is probably the biggest question that they could have ever asked the writers. They actually said, are the first generation Void Hunters still alive? What role do the Void Hunters play in the current new Eriju? Holy shit. This is such a big question, and guess what? They fucking answered it. They said that some of the original Void Hunters are actually still alive. They said some of the original Void Hunters still remain, and that we will meet some of them in the future updates. Now, for everyone that's about to start roasting me for saying that they're all dead, now, I said presumably dead. No, I think I did definitely say that they are all dead, so I will take an L on that part. But with the lore that we did have, it made sense for them to have not been around. Now, obviously, we know that the Hollows do have some time dilation, and that actually brings me into, I think that the Dark Wall is going to be how we end up seeing or meeting this next original Void Hunter, because as we know during the Lost Void story, the Dark Wall has been deeply tied to the files that Rey has been looking into. And when she gained access to those files, she did also find that the original Void Hunters are listed in the files with the Dark Wall and the symbiotic ethereals. This is also the same story mode where Miyabi mentions that anything regarding the Dark Wall cannot be investigated without first talking to the other Void Hunters. So I do think that we could potentially maybe see that one of the Void Hunters or multiple of the Void Hunters are inside of the Dark Wall, and that time is very, very different inside the Dark Wall. And that's what has allowed those original Void Hunters to basically still be alive. Now, if we're going off the same assumption with yokai, how they had yokai on screen as they were saying that one of the AI was active, here, when they do say that the original Void Hunters are still remaining and that we'll meet one of them in future updates, Sunbringer is the one that's on screen. So keep coping, Sunbringer fans. You are actually eating. She is the one that has been mentioned the most during updates, and with the most recent seed thing of her like being alive and being like a captain of a Bang Boo faction or something. I'll put the screenshot on screen. There is a chance that Sunbringer is actually going to be the first original Void Hunter that we make contact with. So good on you guys for continuing to cope. Now, an interesting thing that they mentioned with the Void Hunter title in the current new Eridu is they mentioned that the residents' mindset over the title has changed and that they don't really see it as the same thing. And they do mention that there are some that have been offered the title who have declined, Yixuan being a great example. We know that she was offered the title of Void Hunter, but she did decline the title. Now, we don't know the exact reason as to why. I believe it is assumed that it's just she didn't want to deal with the responsibility of like having to be sent on Void Hunter specific missions when she wants to focus on the summit right now. But she did decline the title. Now, they do also mention, the wording was a little odd here, but they say that there is an organization that is opposed to the Void Hunters, so that there were some members that have joined an organization that are opposed to the Void Hunters. Now, they don't explicitly say that this is like an evil organization or that they're against the Void Hunters, just that they're like opposed to the Void Hunters. So a great theory that we had in chat is that there could be some like Void Hunter level members within TOPS, and that's the like opposing organization, because the mayor is the one who hands out the title of Void Hunter. So if they're opposed to the Void Hunters, then it could just be that they're against the mayor or the Mayflower family as a whole, and so they end up joining a different organization and have like their own little title or whatever. So because of that, we think that the opposing organization could either be TOPS themselves, or it could also be the Exaltists, because as you know, the Exaltists want to have the Age of Hollows, and the Void Hunters' whole thing is it's a title that's granted for helping reduce the Hollow disaster. So it could also just be the Exaltists that they're talking about. But since they mentioned that the Exaltists are kind of like crumpled now that Isolde is gone, it's probably more so TOPS or different organizations that we just don't know yet. And finally, we got information on the Qingming sword. The other question they asked was, where does it come from? And was it forged by Yunkoi Summit? And they explicitly say the Qingming sword did not originate from the Yunkoi Summit, but instead that legends say that it was discovered near the Limnian Hollow, and it was originally a cursed object, not a sword. And this object would feed on the ether within human bodies. So any normal person that would just grab that object, it would feed on their ether and basically curse them. Now, they did mention that a master with incredible control over ether managed to suppress its rampage and also forged that object into the sword. Now, after he forged it into a sword, they do say that he wandered far and wide, but couldn't find a way to destroy the sword. But this master did have his own ether techniques, that being transposition, weapon control, disease mitigation, and communication with animals, which is things that we originally thought we haven't seen any of the other members use yet. But we went around and we found some examples that Yixuan does also have these abilities, or at least the disciples of the Yunkoi Summit. Transposition, an example, is Yixuan kidnapping us using the Qingming bird during the 2.2 story. There's a very interesting scene where we basically get kidnapped by the Qingming bird, and once we're there, we mentioned that it seemed like it was a dream, and now we're at this other location, and then we ask Yixuan if it was a technique, and she says, now you're catching on. So this is probably an example of the transposition being used in our current story with Yixuan. The weapon control, odds are, it's Yi Shinguang. As you can see, she uses 10 million swords in the sky. She is, in fact, Gilgamesh. And so that could just be an example of weapon control. As we know from the original clip of her gameplay, she does also just use a ton of swords during her normal fighting. And she can also control the little sheath that is actually holding the Qingming blade in itself. Now, for disease mitigation, we couldn't really find a great example of this, besides the scene of Yixuan cleansing the miasma in 2.0. However, I don't really know if I want to count the miasma as a really like disease mitigation, but this is the closest example we could find of her technically mitigating a disease. Now, for the communication with animals, at first I thought we didn't have an example, just like all the others, but we actually found two really funny ones. The biggest one being Eishuo, the dog that gives you your fortune every single day, unless you go to Howl, which actually, funny enough, leads us to our next candidate, Howl. During 1.7, we do actually have the interaction when Yixuan is talking to Howl, basically saying that she can understand and that Howl is very intelligent. So that is honestly the best example that we have besides Eishua at the summit. They do end this question off by saying that the source of Talos's and Qingming's power is deeply connected to the hollows, which is why we ended up getting even more evidence for the 7 swords that we were talking about, and how each of these like cursed blades could be formed from cursed objects that are assigned to the different hollows from Hollow Zero. But again, that's just a little theory we got, so let me know what you think. The next question they asked, I'm really glad that they actually asked this to clarify, because originally when I found out during the trailer that Yi Shinguang is actually the owner of the sword, it made no sense to me as to why Yixuan would have given her the sword when it was going to cause the exact same situation between her brother that happened with her and her sister. However, they do clarify, which I'm pretty sure this was never mentioned in game, but that not anyone can wield the Qingming sword, but that the Qingming sword actually chose Shinguang. So it seems that the personality, they do mention that Qingming and Talos have like personalities. So Qingming, whatever the entity is, or the energy within the Qingming blade at this point, basically chose Yi Shinguang to be the user of the sword, which then led to supporting evidence of it making sense that Yixuan did not want her to have the blade, as Yixuan gifted the weapon case that suppresses the sword's effects to Shinguang. Now I'm going to put on screen what that weapon case looks like, as we did see it during the trailer. It is what Shinguang is pulling the Qingming blade out of during that incredible scene where she grows a horn. We'll talk more about that in the breakdown of the actual trailer, so if that comes out first, or if this comes out first, you can go to the channel and check out the other video. But that is what she's pulling the blade out of. Now, they do mention that Yixuan gifted the weapon case, not that she created the weapon case, and since it does suppress the sword's effects, it could be that this weapon case was originally created by that old ether master. That little cut in here, my dumbass was not paying attention. Banyue actually mentioned at the beginning of the special program that Yixuan was actually the one that had the sheath created. So I was about to go into a whole tangent that it could be the old master, but it was definitely Yixuan who had this sheath created. And Yixuan didn't want Shinguang to use the blade, which is why they're kind of tricking her, telling her that she needs to go and train in isolation, and not send her on missions. That way it avoids the chance of her having to use the sword, which gives further supporting evidence that Yixuan does not want Shinguang to be the user of the sword, as it reminds her of the situation that happened between her and her sister. But either way, it is very interesting that both of these blades are suppressed by their ether sheath, essentially. Talos, as you know, is like trapped inside of the little like simulated hollow inside of the sheath, which was also created by the Hoshimi family. And now the Qingming sword is also being suppressed by another sheath. The final question of this incredible 9-minute interview with the writer ended with a question of what other interesting agents or factions will appear in the upcoming Season 2 story. And they do actually give us a little tease of season 3 in this as well. But they do mention that in future stories of season 2, we will return to Janus Quarter. This does make sense, as we do know that we are going to be going to 404 Error with the idols at some point, which is in the Janus Quarter. They do also mention that we will be seeing more members and new faces of public security. Now, odds are, I can guarantee you, this is probably Seth's brother, Commissioner Lowell, which we have been, wondering where the hell he's been at, because they've made it very explicitly clear that he's going to have a role in the story, since he has actively asked people to not tell Seth that we are Phaethon. Wherever that is leading, I have no idea, but hopefully we will find out when he shows up in the story. Now, selfishly, I hope that we do also get to see more of Officer Byron, or Byron, whatever his name is. This dude, at the start of 1.1, as he was giving the mission debriefing to the rest of the officers. And we do also see him standing next to Bringer in this Internet post, which is where we actually, I think, learned his name. I don't remember if they said his name in the actual story of 1.1, but either way, I hope we see more of this guy because his voice is incredible. Speaking of more members, they do also mention that Krampus will be getting more members, and I do think that this will probably be Krampus's boss, because Zhao does mention that Krampus does have a boss, and we don't really know who that is. So that's the most likely candidate. I do know that there's the joke, and I hope that Damien becomes a part of Krampus and that Damien is gonna be playable, but odds are that's not gonna be the case, so we'll have to see what the Krampus members actually are, but hopefully it's Damien. They continue saying that a brand new story regarding an old acquaintance is finally going to be taking place, which, if we take that at face value, definitely seems like it's going to be either the S-rank Billy time, or Nicole, if we're lucky. Odds are it's going to be Billy, because Billy has more evidence of getting a S-rank version right now than Nicole does. Nicole definitely will get one in the future, but Billy has actively been like, oh, maybe I should put on my old threads. So odds are we'll get a new story revolving Billy, which would be really sick. Another cut in, I remembered that they had the Corrin wallpaper in the background the entire time that they were doing this. So honestly, either that could have just been random and that's the writer's favorite character, or the one that they had on, or Corrin is actually the one that we'll be getting a new story of. But I just wanted to put that option out there as well. And they finally finished this off by saying season 3, we're going to be meeting the debut of a mysterious friend. And that's it. They didn't give any further evidence of who the friend could be, just that in season 3, we will be meeting a mysterious friend. So as you can see, there was a lot of lore bombs that was given during this writer thing. I'm really surprised that they asked legitimate questions that I never thought that they would just directly ask or directly answer. To be fair, I think a lot of this should have been written in the game where we kind of knew about it, especially with the Qingming sword, considering that this entire arc has been based around it. And I think it's a little odd that we find out that the Qingming sword was the one who chose Shinguang through this instead of like in-game stuff. But I guess that's besides the point. I'm just glad that we got this. It was such a treat. And as I said at the start of this, we ended up dissecting it for 3+ hours. The main one being the little like 7 sword theory that we had. But yeah, I hope that we get more of these in the future, and I'm excited to see where the future of this game goes. But thank you guys so much for joining, and I hope you're excited for the future of this game. I'll see you in the next one.